I'm Jay Taylor. I'm here at the Metals Investor Forum. It's November 12th, 2021, and I'm here with Chris Taylor, President and CEO of Great Bear Resources. Needless to say, one of my favorite companies because I was able to get in at an early stage, a world-class deposit in the making, the Dixie project in the Red Lake District of Ontario. Really glad to have Chris with me to give me an update and what the plans are going forward. Recently, the company's gotten some recognition in the market that I thought was long overdue. Chris, thanks for joining me. And what are your plans now? You're going to be coming out with a maiden resource, I understand, Q1 potentially of 2022.
Yeah, that's the plan. We have over 300 kilometers, so 300,000 meters of drilling to date. And we plan on putting out the resource. Mostly that'll be the shallow drilling that we've done, down to about 350, 400 meters, somewhere around that level. Basically to show you what the open pit potential is like on the project. But I mean, that's just the beginning. It's like the tip of an iceberg or the head of a human being. Most of the system will go down below that. We think the closest analog is something like the Hemlo deposit, which goes down for a couple kilometers. So we expect, in the future, most of the ounces produced on the project are likely to come from underground mining that's below the pit, not the pit itself. Yeah. And that's saying something because we think the pit will be pretty sizable.
Yeah, and of course, this is the LP fault, the LP zone. And initially, when I first learned the story, you had these typical high-grade vein systems, narrow vein, but extremely high-grade.
Yep.
That's in Red Lake.
Yep.
You still have those. They're not figuring into the picture right now.
Not
yet. Now, but might in the future.
Correct. I think what you'll see next year, Jay, is that initial maiden resource disclosure and then a resource update later in the year. And the resource update will have some of those satellite zones, the limb zone and the hinge zone, and some of the deeper drilling that we've already done, frankly. If you look at the last news releases, even at the LP, the latest news releases are drill holes that won't be in the initial resource.
And they go how deep?
The deepest ones are about 800 meters.
800 meters. And so these systems, as you say, go very deep, and the same would be true over there with the Dixie, the limb, and the hinge.
Yeah.
How far apart are they from the LP? Those other high-grade narrow zones?
Only about 500 meters. They're literally right beside each other. So from an underground development perspective, I would anticipate, keep in mind forward-looking statements, right?
Yes, of course.
So, but I would anticipate there'd be probably an access drift about halfway between them. And you'd be then putting the spurs, workings, and drilling off everything underground to define resource and ultimately develop. So that initial decline would probably be between the LP fault and the Dixie limb and hinge zone.
I see. And actually, those narrow zones come up to the surface too, don't they?
Correct. Everything goes right to the surface.
Everything goes right up to surface. And I remember when when you were making that discovery, thinking about Goldcorp's discovery years ago, and it was very, very deep.
Yeah.
And it was a company maker for Goldcorp, essentially.
Absolutely.
Rob McEwen had that. I remember it very well.
Absolutely. That began at about 800 meters vertical depth and went to 2.5 kilometers vertical depth.
So you'll have the maiden resource, and then you'll do some more drilling and you'll keep expanding, because how much of this long LP fault have you explored?
We've explored about 11 kilometers of about 20 kilometers of strike length. And, there is gold in all the drilling along 11 kilometers that we've done. We didn't have any holes when they hit the fault. All those holes had some gold in them. Now, the best results were in the middle of the project where there's a big flexure in the fault.
Yeah.
And that's where we're doing the resource definition.
Right.
But there could be other flexures along strike on the fault. It needs to be explored a lot more than it is. And really the resource expansion here, once the first one goes out, will be at depth in that main area and potentially along strike as we test more and more of the target.
Right. So, okay, so you've got an awful lot of things to look at and to drill. And I mean, the amazing thing here, it's fairly typical of these little juniors. You're not a little junior anymore, you're something else. But these little guys, they start out and they come out right away soon with a resource. And I think more and more people are recognizing the economics require multi-million ounces to make sense. And so I'm counting Chris as a shareholder. Put you on the spot. Of a multi-million ounce resource. I know you can't talk about it yet, but just looking at the dimensions of the LP and the grades, I don't know how you could expect anything less than that. But so going forward, then I can't imagine that there aren't some big guys that are really sort of drooling. They're saying, "Gosh, how can we?" Because those guys need mill feed. They're going to need ounces. They're doing a good job of not jumping in and buying projects at nosebleed prices, and they're being very disciplined, and their balance sheets are very clean, but their reserves are dwindling, and they're going to need some feedstock. So, any comments on that you can make?
Well, I can't talk about anything specific, but I can say there's really nothing like the LP fault discovery, the Dixie project, that's operated by a small independent company in the world, as far as I know. And when they are for a while, then they get snatched up anyway. An example would be, Pradium was that's an announcement that came out earlier this week, and it was about a $3.5 billion Canadian acquisition deal. And that's symptomatic. Even if you manage as the operational company to get a project like that into production, eventually it becomes a target for groups that are looking for mill feed. The good thing Great Bear has done is we've been very transparent with the results. They're all available on the website. Anybody can download them and try to quantify how many ounces there are, all on their own. The data's all there. So with that kind of transparency, I think the only people that think that we don't have a resource out are the average retail type investor, because anybody that has mining software, modeling software, they can wrap those numbers around themselves, right? And we do that deliberately because we want people to see what we have. It's a great discovery. The more transparent we are, the better it serves us and our shareholders.
Right. So it's sort of open source in a way.
In a sense, as much as you can.
Letting people know, letting the market know what you have. And well, that's good. I'm really glad to see people starting to pay attention to your stock, and your spin-off royalty company is doing very nicely too. And that's something I think people might want to pay attention to too. Is it a 2.5% royalty? Is it?
It's a 2% royalty.
2% royalty.
Yep.
On X number of ounces.
Yeah, it would go indefinitely into the future, and we wanted to make sure that because of what you were saying with majors and all that, looking for projects, that our shareholders had a long-term exposure to that royalty, and that's why we spun it out to our own shareholders. So it's good to see the independent validation there as well.
It really
certainly beginning to be understood as well.
Yeah, and certainly the upside, given the fact that these systems, LP and the others, run to great depth. There's no reason to think they won't. The maiden resource will be just the beginning, I think.
If you had the analogy of the human body, the maiden resource would be the head, and the rest of the upside is the body that lies down below that. There's only a few people, and I'm not one of them, where the head is most of the human volume.
There are some big heads.
Yes, exactly.
There are some big egos. You're not one of those people, Chris. And really a pleasure meeting up with you again, and we'll look forward to the news flow. There's going to be quite a bit, I guess.
Well, thank you, Jay. Very nice to talk to you in person once again.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a mask, too. At least for a few minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Take care, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Jay.